You ever notice how the people in charge, the ones making the rules, sometimes seem to be the first ones to break them? We see it all the time, right? From the world stage down to your own workplace. But what if I told you this isn't just about a few bad apples? What if it's a predictable glitch in our psychology, a hidden connection between having power and having double standards? Okay, let's get into it. First, let's start with something we've all experienced. Why is it that future you is this amazing person who's going to run a marathon and learn a new language, but present you can't even get off the couch? We make these incredible, ambitious plans for the distant future, but when tomorrow actually comes, we're stuck in the weeds. Well, the answer to that question is the key to this whole thing. It's all about how our brain handles distance. And that difference in how we see things brings us to our first big idea: how our minds travel. It turns out our mental viewpoint, our perspective, it shifts dramatically depending on how far away something feels to us. This is a concept called psychological distance. Now, the key thing to get here is that psychological distance isn't just about miles on a map or days on a calendar. It's our brain's own internal ruler for how connected we are to something. If an event is happening right now in this room, we feel it. But the further away it gets from our direct experience, the more distant it becomes in our head. And researchers have basically broken this down into four main flavors. First, you've got temporal distance. That's time. Next year feels a lot further away than tomorrow. Then there's spatial distance, what's happening here versus in another country. You also have social distance, how you think about a close friend versus a total stranger. And finally, hypotheticality, how likely something is. A maybe feels way more distant than a for sure. So what's the mechanism that drives all this? There's a theory for it, and it's called construal level theory, or CLT for short. You can think of it as the rule book for this mental shift. And the main rule is pretty simple. The more psychological distance, the more abstract and big picture our thinking becomes. So CLT says that distance triggers two totally different ways of thinking. When something is close to us, we get stuck on the how. But when it's far away, we start thinking about the why. And this chart lays it out perfectly. When something is psychologically close, we see it in super concrete detail. We're not just studying, we're reading a specific chapter in this heavy textbook. We are focused on the how. But from a distance, our thinking gets abstract. That same act of reading becomes part of a much bigger goal, the why, succeeding academically. It's like we zoom out and see the whole forest instead of just the individual trees. So this is the golden rule right here. Distance acts like a filter. It strips away all the messy, complicated details and leaves us with just the core essence, the big ideas, the main principles of a situation. Now, you're going to want to remember this because this one idea is the key that unlocks everything else we're about to talk about. Okay, so we've seen how distance changes our perspective on events. But what happens when that distance isn't about time or space? What if it's social? What happens when one person starts to feel psychologically distant from, well, everyone else? That right there is exactly what happens when someone gets a taste of power. And this brings us to what researchers call the power paradox. Because it turns out that power doesn't just change how people behave. No, it goes deeper. It actually changes how they judge behavior, both their own and everybody else's. And here's the punchline from a whole bunch of really fascinating studies. When you give people a sense of power, they suddenly become much tougher moral judges of other people. They hold everyone else to a really high standard. But when it comes to their own actions, suddenly they're way more lenient. They give themselves a pass. And you can see that effect right here in the actual data. In one study, they made some people feel powerful and others not so powerful. Look on the left. The high power group condemned cheating way more harshly. But then, on the right, when they were given a chance to cheat to win a lottery, yep, that same high power group cheated more. They preached one thing, but did the exact opposite. So, we have these two big puzzle pieces, right? One, psychological distance makes us think in abstract, big-picture terms. Two, power makes people hypocrites. So now, let's put them together. This is the aha moment. Here's the chain reaction. It starts when someone gets power. Right away, that creates social distance. They're not one of the team anymore. They're the boss. Now remember our golden rule? That distance flips a switch in their brain, pushing them into abstract why thinking. So when they look at other people's behavior, they see it through the lens of abstract moral principles, like cheating is always wrong. But when they look at themselves, they're not thinking about the rules. They're focused on their own abstract, high-level goals, like I need to win or I deserve this. And that makes it incredibly easy to justify bending the rules for themselves.
So that old saying, power corrupts, it's not quite the full story. It's actually more accurate to say that power rewires your brain. It fundamentally changes your cognitive framework, so you literally think about yourself differently than you think about anyone else. But is this effect unavoidable? Does power always do this? Well, not exactly. It turns out there's a huge crucial catch. There's a check on this whole process, and it all comes down to one simple thing: whether the power feels legitimate or not. You see, this whole hypocrisy effect is fueled by a sense of entitlement. It's the feeling that I've earned this, I deserve this. But if a powerful person feels like they don't deserve their spot, if their power feels illegitimate, the entire thing flips on its head. That psychological license to have double standards, it just disappears. And check out this table from another experiment. It's wild. The hypocrisy we've been talking about, being easy on yourself, it only shows up in that one box: high power that feels legitimate. But look what happens when the power is high, but feels illegitimate. Whoa, the effect completely reverses. Those people became stricter on themselves than they were on others. The researchers even came up with a new word for this, which is pretty cool: hypocrisy. It's the unexpected tendency to hold yourself to an even higher, stricter standard than you hold everyone else to. It's this fascinating counter effect that shows people who feel powerless or like their power is undeserved can become their own absolute harshest critics. All right, so let's boil it all down. What are the big takeaways? First, distance in any form pushes our brains to think in big, abstract terms. Second, power works as a type of social distance, setting the stage for this mental shift. This combo can lead the powerful to judge others by abstract rules while giving themselves a pass to pursue their own goals. And finally, the all-important kicker: this whole hypocrisy machine only works if the power feels earned. That sense of legitimacy is the key that unlocks the double standard. And all of this leaves us with one last big question to chew on. If our moral compass can be so easily skewed by perspective, by how close or far away we feel from something, what does that really say about our deepest principles? Who are we really when you strip all that distance away and we're just standing right up close?